Most people didn't want to testify against Capone. People that knew him, and particularly people who knew him, didn't want to testify against him. So the government had to get them to testify against him.
And the government could be pretty persuasive. This witness was casino cashier Fred Rees. Rees could provide evidence of Capone's income from gambling. He was arrested and held in a very special cell.
And the reason they picked this cell out is that the cell was infested with bugs, particularly cockroaches. It was just infested with these bugs. And they put Rees into that cell. He couldn't eat, he couldn't drink, he couldn't do anything. The poor man was all but paralyzed. And finally, after a couple of days there, Mr. Rees was about prepared to tell them anything they wanted to hear. You're not allowed to do things like that to witnesses.
In spite of such tactics, and in spite of the work of IRS agent Frank Wilson, the prosecution had little hard evidence of Capone's actual earnings. Capone knew this and continued to play the showman. He was relaxed enough to pose for photographs during court recess, even for one picture while the court was actually in session. This is the picture Barati took. The pose was that of a man enjoying a joke. But despite the innocent look, Capone was no choir boy. As the net began to tighten, Capone's goons had tried bribing the jurors. They tried threatening witnesses. They even tried to bomb the homes of the prosecution lawyers.
Al Capone called in 5 hoodlums from New York to kill my father and the federal agents. The Secret Service, fortunately, got wind of this, and Al Capone's cohorts went to Al Capone and said, "Don't do this. You'll bring the world down upon you to kill federal agents." I, as a youngster going to grammar school, had a police escort to school and back again, and my activity was very limited. I had friends tell me now that their mothers didn't want them to play with me, baseball or whatever, football, because of the danger.
But the bullying and intimidation didn't work. For Scarface, time was running out. On October 17, 1931, after a 10-day hearing, Capone was found guilty. The guilty verdict was followed by the maximum penalty.
And if he behaves himself while he's a guest of Uncle Sam in Atlanta, he'll be out again in only 7.5 years. And so, up until 1940, Mr. Capone will be Mr. 40,886. Now for a change, they're taking him for a ride. Let that be a good lesson to you. Always be sure and pay your income tax.
The heavy sentence sent a ripple of apprehension through gangland. After 2 years in jail, Capone was transferred here to Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. This one-time military base was converted into a federal penitentiary to house the top public enemies. Capone was among the first intake. Life in Alcatraz was different from other prisons. No hard labor, plenty to eat. But this was a ploy. Overfed and unfit, the men could hardly swim the mile across the bay to freedom. And psychologically, the inmates had it tough. A strict daily routine was conducted in enforced silence. Capone was not to be released until 1940. By then, his mind was ravaged by long-term syphilis, and he was to die at the early age of 48.